Hi, my name is Tim. I am part of Ivy Church in Manchester, and Ivy is part of the Global New Thing Network. I, alongside a great guy called Ollie, lead one of our campuses and also run the residency program at Ivy part-time. So I guess one of the distinctions that New Thing makes when it talks about residencies is that it's not an internship. And the thing that strikes me about that is that internships seem to be more about how could someone give a year to fill a ministry gap, or it might be a particular passion that they have, but there's something that needs to happen in the local church. Whereas residency is much more about recognizing the call of God on someone's life to plant churches that plant churches. What are the ministry gaps that they have, and then how do we give them the opportunities and stretch them and put them in places where they're going to learn new things and do new things, knowing that one day they're going to run a church. So for us at Ivy, we have a few residents, and one thing I noticed is that each residence experience is very different depending on what site they go to on their placement, what experience they've had before. So we talk to the residents to get a sense of what their passions are that they might not have been able to work in, but also to identify things that they haven't done that maybe they're not passionate about, but still get them to do those kinds of things anyway, because they're going to need to know how to do HR, they're going to need to know how to do finance and budgeting, they're going to need to know how to do things that aren't very sexy like health and safety assessments, alongside getting them out of their comfort zone on the street, doing outreach, talking to people about Jesus, learning how to run kids ministry. So the program is structured around that, so that whatever experience they have or whatever experience they have at their site throughout the year, they've got all of those key touch points so that they can think, okay, I might not know everything I need to know about running a kids ministry at the end of the year, but at least I know what the right questions are to start with. You know, as I plant and the site grows and we start getting children, I know that I need to ask these questions. I might not have all the answers, but certainly know where to start in terms of planning for what we might do. If someone was going to start a residency program at their church, I think the first question I'd want to ask is why? What's the vision that they have? Do they have a vision that will inspire people who are leaders? Because the cost of doing a residency program is high if there isn't the vision that calls you to it, if that makes sense. So if there's a vision to see churches planted across your local area and beyond, and that your passion as a church is to train up leaders that are going to go and plant those churches, that has to be there at the start. If it's only we'd like to train some people, you haven't got the vision that's going to draw them through and actually get the best people. And so I think the first thing is you need to have a compelling vision for church planting that goes beyond the immediate activities of your site. The second thing is, I would say that the senior pastor needs to be really involved in shaping the content, the vision, and the approach to the program, and also needs to be able to commit a reasonable amount of time to the residents as they're on it, as they're on the program. And I think that the other thing is that I would say is there's loads of different content, loads of different materials you might want to use. It's really important to get your residents to think about the DNA of the culture that you're building and the values that you have. Encourage them to think about, okay, what's the vision, what's God calling them to, what values would they want to have as they plant church, and you will do all of that kind of stuff naturally. So I think from a leadership perspective, the contents would almost be the easy bit, and if you don't know what to do with that, then New Thing, great for helping with those kinds of things. But it's thinking, what's the bigger picture of the leadership pipeline? What are you going to do with them when they've finished, and where do you want them to be able to what do you want them to be able to do when they finish, and how are you going to help them do that, and have that in your mind from the outset. Otherwise you'll get to the end of the year and then be like, oh no, what do we do next? But if you start with the end in mind, that actually we're going to plant a new campus or a new site, or we're going to start a new missional community, or whatever you want to call it, in a year's time, and therefore these residents are the ones that are going to come and learn how to do that, that will then mean that you have something for them to go and do afterwards, and that you're sending them into something, and they're not coming to the end of the program thinking, oh, what happens now? but then also that everything that you're doing throughout the year is thinking, they're going to be doing this, they're going to literally be doing this in a year's time. So that will really sharpen the reflection on, is this actually helpful or is this not helpful? Is this just good but not the best thing that we could be imparting to the residents as they go through the year? This is my third year of leading the residency now. The first year we had 4 people, and they came from totally different backgrounds and all gone on to do really good things. And the second year we had a group of 6 of us, and we decided at that point to open it wider, to think how are we training leaders more generally, and people who might not be like site leaders or campus pastors, but who would potentially form part of their core teams for a church plant. Now, I think in terms of developing and training leaders, it has done that, the residency. But I think what was missing is that really clear intention that the reason they're doing residency is because there's a call of God on their life to plant churches, to go and plant churches. And so while some of them have gone on to become pioneering kingdom ministries, others maybe haven't done that. And so I think as we've approached this year, the thing that we've done differently is to make it much more sharp in identifying a calling to church planting explicitly, not more of a, I feel a call of God in my life and I want to find out what that is. We would say then residency isn't for you yet, but actually the people that we started this year with are those that have a clear sense that I'm called to plant churches, and I need to find out and learn how to do that. So I think one of the big things that I've learned about residency it's having that end in mind, knowing that the reason that they're here is because they're going to plant a church in a year's time, potentially, that we will train with that end in mind. Yeah, so as I think about this year, all 3 residents have the potential to go and to plant something at the end of the year, and it might be a small missional community of a few people starting something based out of a home. It might be that there are bigger things that are kind of brewing or in the process of being thought about. One of the key changes that we've made to the residency is that throughout the year, because we're a network of 5 churches, we would take the resident from the church that they were already a part of and send them to spend several months with the other campuses to get a different experience and to learn from the way that each church lives out the vision and values and the call of God on those churches. But what that meant was that they weren't really connected to their sending church, and so they were away. So one of the big things we've changed for this year is that for the first term, that will take them up till Christmas, they'll go to a different site, but that from January onwards, for the next 6 months of their residency year, they will go back to their original site and be part of the process of preparing to plant from that site. So earlier this year, we ran a New Thing Catalyst community here in Manchester, and we gathered leaders from across the country and across Europe. And each of the Ivy site leaders developed a vision for the future for the next 2 years that would involve church planting. And so that, with giving that freedom to dream and to plan, I guess it created a real sense of greater focus on the residency program as being the major pathway for seeing those churches planted. So now each of the sites has plans to plant, and they're now sending the people that they would want to lead those sites or ministries or whatever you want to call them, whatever they might be, through the residency with the aim that they will be pioneering those church plants or missional communities when they finish. So with that being the end in mind, we will send them back after a few months to their original site to be part of that formative process, so they can prepare with that campus pastor or the site leader for the church plant and begin to build a team from within that church to go out at the end of the year or at some point after that. As I think about what does success look like for the residents, one of the things, I suppose it's a few different things really. We have kind of a list, if you like, of key things that we would expect someone who's a church planter to know, to understand, and to be able to do. So some of those will be practical things, and they will be assessed and developed in those things, like how to lead meetings, how to run a core team, how to preach, how to do basic pastoral care, how to do pastoral care ministry. And so there'll be lots of practical things. But I think one of the another key consideration is we would want to have embedded key values within that resident, and you can tell if that's been successful by the language that they're using towards the end of the residency. So obviously a major value for us is multiplication and reproducing leaders. So we spend a lot of time talking about how are you going to train someone to do what you're doing, who's your apprentice, and always ask that question. And so success looks like, for me, in part, being able to do some of the things that you would expect a campus pastor or a church planter to be able to do, but also that they have the DNA of a reproducing church in them when they go into plant. And so again, I suppose that you can tell by the language that they're using. But I also think residents put themselves under a lot of pressure, and they think they have to be really good at everything. And I guess my job is to apprentice them and to have those regular conversations and feedback. And I always say to them, your goal this year is not to do primarily, it is to learn. And your goal is growth, and you can't fail if you have that as your goal. So that is, I guess it's a more open-ended goal that one would be. But we do have, I guess, a set of things that we would want them to be able to do, and they would have had experience of doing it at least once, so preaching, for example, or anything else that they might end up doing. We also, again, we want the residents this year to not just learn how to do stuff, but learn how to live as a campus pastor or as a site leader. And so we encourage the people that they're on placement with to share their lives with them, to have them over for dinner regularly, to invite them into the whole process of everything that they're doing, so that it's not just learning to do how they do, but becomes something that they're seeing modelled by another person. The hardest thing, for me, is when the residents are going through a hard time, whether it's because of personal things that are going on or times of crisis in their leadership journey, or external factors over which you have no control. And sometimes it might be that they're struggling with a particular aspect of the residency program, or they're not having a good time at their site for whatever reason. And I personally find that really hard, because I want them to have the best experience. The thing is that the reality is that those hard times are formative, and those are really important moments, and they're character building moments. And so as I look back over previous years, I think, I can see how God used that to bring about something in that person's life, and it was actually part of their formation. But at the time, as the residency director, you're like, Lord, help this person. Like, sometimes your heart breaks them, and you're just like, oh man, this is so rubbish that they're going through this, or whatever it might be. But then I suppose seeing then how God uses different things and the growth in the person, because normally it's about something that's going on deep inside that person. And then I guess the thing that I've learned as a residency director is to trust the process of residency, and that it will do what it is designed to do. But you see it over the course of a year, and what always happens at the end of the year, they're very different people than they were when they started, and God will have moulded them and shaped them. But there's that kind of refining process that happens, which is sometimes hard to see the residents go through.